Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be taking a look at the traveler adventure Marooned on Marduk. Written by Martin J. Doherty and released in 2016 by Mongoose Publishing for their second edition line. The module is 31 pages, but the adventure itself is pretty short and easily playable in a single session. In fact, it only took us half of one of our normally very long marathon sessions. It offers some great opportunities for combat, survival, discovery, and character roleplay. It also gives us a lot of great world information, not just over the world of Marduk itself, but as far as the Ogman cluster, which is located in the Trojan Reach. However, it's also lacking in a few areas that game masters are going to need to address if they're going to want to run this adventure for themselves. So what I'm going to do is offer my criticisms and my tips as a game master who has successfully run this scenario.
And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm going to be giving this to you from a player's side of things, as well as my own special brand of humor.
But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. Spoiler Town, Spoilerama, and any players out there, if you ever wish to experience this scenario, please stop now. But definitely send your game master this way to see if Marooned on Marduk would be a good fit for your group. Alrighty game masters, let's cut this open. The scenario takes place in the Sindal subsector, specifically the Ogman cluster. The travelers don't need a ship in order to do this scenario, so it works as a good scenario to do if your group hasn't acquired a ship yet. But it's still perfectly playable if they do have a ship, they're just not going to use it in this adventure. The module devotes a good deal of information to the world of Marduk. Essentially, 200 years ago it was a thriving planet dotted with cities. But like many of the planets that are in the Trojan Reach, those were all annihilated during the Sindalian Civil War. And the population that was living on the continents was wiped out. And the natives that were all living on the remote archipelagos, those survived, and their descendants are still living there to this day. But they've all been reduced down to tech level 5. Now, the General Development Company has set up a highport station in orbit and a downport station on an artificial island. The PCs are going to enter this scenario either when they're just passing through Marduk or they're going to be called there, but they're going to be contacted by a representative from the General Development Corporation who's either going to be a new NPC altogether or it could be one of the contacts from one of the player characters' backstories.
Hey guys, I got a message from my old buddy Alexis. He and I go way back. Anyway, he's a manager of something over at Jetico now, and he says he's got a paying gig for us, so you want to go check it out?
Now, as far as what the job is, that's not given at all in this adventure. So, game masters, before you run this scenario, you might want to have a few ideas ready as far as what Jetico might be offering them as a job. That's what you're probably going to be doing after this scenario is done, but more on that in a bit. Now, due to security and a lack of landing space that's on the downport's artificial island, the travelers are going to have to dock at the high port and then go through customs and then take the shuttle down to the surface.
Game masters, roleplay this out quite a bit. Go ahead and show them the mundane things that they go through once they land at a starport, especially if they've been out in space for quite a while. You know, show them going through customs, catching a burger up at the high port. Maybe they'll catch some rumors or some foreshadowing about some Ogman raiders that have been doing some nefarious stuff recently. But go ahead and show all these little details. That way it don't look too suspicious once you start role-playing out what's going on inside that shuttle ride.
The shuttle down to the surface is the Pandrisha, a pretty standard passenger shuttle. Maybe draw out the deck plan out, let the player characters choose which seats they want. We also get 3 NPC personalities for characters that are going to be joining them on the same shuttle ride, but I also suggest that you add 3 to 4 more NPC passengers.
Okay guys, we seem to be going through a lot of detail about this mundane flight, which leads me to believe that we're about to do a locked room scenario about a space plane, which is great. I have been looking forward to a locked room scenario on a plane for some time. So my idea is that we should sit in the back. That way we can keep our eyes on everybody.
The flight down to the surface should take them a couple hours. Maybe roleplay out a few details as maybe they're meeting the other passengers aboard the ship or overhearing them have different conversations with each other or on the phone. But meanwhile, a warlord from the neighboring world of Ogma is going to make a daring attack on Marduk. However, the description that they give of how this attack works with different ships jumping in right next to the port, that doesn't work for me. The Hunter diameter limit becomes a bit of a problem when trying to describe how this fight scene works out, and while you could just do some hand waving as the game master and say that, well, the only ships that attacked the high port were the ones that didn't miss jump because we were trying to jump too close to the gravity well, I prefer that you do a completely different strategy altogether. My idea is that the Augments captured a couple of large ships, like a subsidized liner and a free trader. Maybe the crew of those ships is now hostage and they're manning the communications with guns to their head or something like that. But either way, those two ships are going to be approaching the high port like nothing at all is wrong. And then, as they get close to the station, that's when the Augment Raiders are all going to jump in, but they're all going to be outside the 100 diameter limit. But at the same time, the Trojan Horse ship is just going to open up all its cargo doors, and all these fighters are going to come flying out, and they're going to attack the station. However you want to do the attack itself is fine. It doesn't really matter because the player characters aren't there, but later on they're going to hear about how the attack went, and you want to make sure that it somehow works with the rules of the game that they're playing. Meanwhile, on the player character's shuttle, alarms are going to start blaring, and the ship is going to begin some evasive maneuvers as it falls under attack from one of these Augment Raiders. Anyone not strapped into their seat is going to have to make some rolls in order to get to a seat, or they're going to take damage. And this continues until the player characters manage to make the roll. The potential issue here is that a player character who's got terrible athletic skills or just bad dice rolling might fail this thing over and over again and become too heavily damaged for what should be a colorful bit of excitement, not something that can debilitate them before the adventure really begins. So my suggestion here is maybe after 2 rounds of a player character failing these rolls, have one of the NPCs that's on this ship with them maybe unstrap themselves from the seat and help the player character to the safety of one of the chairs, maybe help strap them in. This creates a little bit of a bonding between the PCs and the NPCs, and that could become pretty helpful later on in this adventure.
On the flip side, if all of the player characters make it safely to their seats, go ahead and have one of the NPC passengers get caught without being in a seat. So now they're getting bounced all up and down the shuttlecraft, maybe they get knocked unconscious. And this could lead to an interesting moral dilemma for the player characters, because now they got to debate if they should leave the safety and the security of their harness chair in order to go save this NPC.
Eventually their ship is going to be hit, disabling its thrusters, and they're going to begin crashing. Alarms are going to blare, little masts might fall from the ceiling, and the ship is going to crash land on one of the continents that's far, far away from any civilization at all. The pilots are going to be killed in this crash, and the travelers as well as those 3 NPC co-passengers are going to be marooned here. However, I say you up the tragedy a few steps. Instead of saying that those 3 NPC passengers were the only other passengers that were on the shuttle with them, put more on the ship and say that these were the only 3 survivors of the crash. Maybe there was one more that survived the crash, someone who was hurt and is now unconscious, and now the survivors have to take care of this unconscious person, maybe carrying their body through the rest of the adventure on a stretcher. To really ratchet up the horror of this crash, I added a young mother and her 2 young children that were traveling on the shuttle with them. The kids spent the flight, running around, asking all sorts of questions, paying a lot of attention to the vending machine, and just kind of running up and down the aisles like a bunch of kids do. Then when the missile struck the ship, the player characters could just watch in horror as the mother and one of her children got sucked out the hole in the side. And the remaining child was strapped safely into her seat, but she was struck in the head by a piece of shrapnel, and she just watched the hole in the side of the ship, her mouth gulping like a fish as the synapses in her brain fired at random, and she died just looking at the hole where her mother and brother vanished.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! You added that horror show? What the hell, man? I had nightmares for weeks after that.
Horror author. Anyway, the survivors can locate a few emergency survival kits on board, as well as a single rifle and a single shotgun. Night is coming, and one of the player characters is going to become concerned about trying to bury the dead, which might lead to some arguing between the survivor NPCs. That's also why I suggest that you endear the player characters to maybe one of the fallen non-player characters. That way they might feel a little bit vested in this discussion. Maybe they want to bury this person that saved their lives. Now, eventually the Augment ship is going to approach the crash site. The raiders want to salvage any of the technology that they can from aboard, as well as capture any passengers that they can, can and slave them. That way they can build and maintain any more technology for the Augmen Raiders. Now, the non-player character survivors are going to want to run once they see this ship coming, and being underarmed and against superior forces, the player characters should hopefully agree with this. The module gives us no map of the crash site, and I really wish that it did. So how I described the crash site to my player characters was that they were in the middle of a very kind of low plain, and it was dotted with some scrub brush here and there, but about a mile away they could see where the scrub brush was getting a lot thicker, and there were some small trees interdispersed with that, and that kept going to where they could see some very kind of steeply sharp-angled hills that were further off in the distance, and that looked like the only real place that they could go run and hide. The Raider ship is going to come down above the wreck, and probably just before or just after the player characters manage to make it to cover. But the module doesn't give us any stats at all for the Raiders. So what I did is that I added 2 vehicles that the Raiders had, like Mad Max dune buggies. Each of those had 3 Raiders inside of it, and that came rolling out of the ship and began tracking down any of the survivors. Now, aside from their normal weapons, I went ahead and gave the Raiders these net launchers that they could use to capture anybody that they could. And so if you still have a few nameless NPCs that were maybe in the crash with them and survived, but they didn't want to go run and hide where the rest of the player characters were, maybe the PCs could watch in horror as this other group of survivors, gets captured by the Augmen Raiders. Anyone that tries to resist gets gunned down, and that's a good way to make the demonstration that the PCs really, really need a run.
Holy crap, guys, those Raiders are getting closer to us. We need to start moving faster.
As the PCs move deeper and deeper into this maze work of thorny bushes, whenever they're not hiding from the sounds of roaring engines that are kind of going up and down the lanes beside them, they're going to encounter some of Marduk's wildlife, such as these cute little harmless sparrows here, and a huge pack of these man-eating hyena things that are going to begin hunting them.
This part was a lot of excitement for us because we were getting stalked by those Garen aim breaks or whatever they were called, but we didn't want to shoot our guns to alert the Raiders of where we were, so we just had to fight them off of us using our machetes and our rifle butts in order to keep it quiet.
Eventually, the trails leading between these bushes are going to begin straightening out, and that's when the travelers are going to discover that what they believe to be hills from a distance are really the ruins of an ancient, crumbling, and bombed-out city. Between the rain and these hyena monsters and the Raiders that are chasing them, maybe at this point you could say that the Raider ship has stopped salvaging whatever it could, and it's joined in the chase as well, so now it's kind of slowly hovering above all of this foliage with searchlights going up and down the different trails. At this point, the player characters are probably going to start entering some of this cave system that a lot of the crumbling city has formed. As they go further and deeper inside, they're going to start encountering several signs of recent activity, like recent fire pits and the like.
Hey guys, I thought the continents of this planet were unpopulated, but somebody has definitely been here recently. So keep your eyes peeled.
Eventually, the PCs are going to encounter several natives who are also hiding from these stalking creatures and the Raiders. This can lead to some interesting roleplay with these primitive people who are all about the equivalent of 19th century when it comes to technology. They're going to be mistrusting of the PCs, and they're not going to be able to speak the same language with them. Maybe this is going to lead to a fight with the PCs. Maybe they're going to reach a level of trust between them and decide to hole up together for the night, keeping the lookout for these monsters that are stalking them from the shadows. This is all completely up to the PCs as well as the PC's dice. My only problem here is that there are 7 natives, and once you add those in with the 3 NPC survivors that we already have, that gives the Game Master 10 NPCs to manage. So what you might want to do as a GM is just use less non-player characters, or maybe kill a few of them off very early on for dramatic reasons. That way the game becomes less about the GM juggling all these different personalities and more about the player characters who are supposed to be the real heroes of the story. Once the Raiders have left and the morning sun is rising on a new day, the player characters are going to start getting some radio transmissions from the rescue teams that are out now looking for them. Now this could lead to an interesting scene as the PCs might have to race to open ground somewhere where the rescue ships can land, and these hyena monsters are coming out and attacking them, and they have to chase, and it's all exciting. Maybe the NPC natives are like, "No, I'll cover you," and they've got their single-shot breech-loading rifles as they're shooting hyena monsters that are coming after the PCs. Or maybe the PCs have to climb to the top of one of these ruined buildings, maybe to stick up a transponder or something very high up, or maybe is a good place for one of the rescue ships to land. So now there's monsters leaping between all the pieces of rubble, these crumbling stairs, and that could lead to a lot of fun as we're trying to get aboard the rescue ship. Again, this is all completely up to you and your players as far as how it goes. Feel free to move the action level up or down, just depending on how difficult of a time your PCs have had with it. Now once the characters are rescued, that is the end of the adventure. Maybe the travelers will announce that they found natives that are living on the continent. Maybe they're going to begin seeking revenge on the Augment raiders who shot them down. Maybe their ship that was parked at the high port got damaged in the attack, and now the PCs have to do some jobs to get some money to get their ship flying again. Once again, that's completely up to you. Now, one suggestion is you could have this adventure then lead the PCs into the next adventure being Maker God, which opens up after an Augment raid, just like this one. I have not run this scenario yet, so I can't comment much about it until I have, but it does offer some really good insight into the Augment culture and provides stats for Augment raiders, which is what I used for the raiders when I ran this scenario. Overall, I found Marooned on Marduk to be okay. It felt a little bit too linear for my liking. It even warns game masters about being a railroad, but since it only presents us with one path, that makes it difficult for it not to be linear, especially if you're dealing with newer game masters, and being that this is an introductory scenario, newer game masters are going to be a lot of the people who are going to use this. I would have preferred it if it had given us much more options as far as what the PCs could do and what they might encounter if they do it, different directions and obstacles. Maybe they're never going to meet the natives because they decided to go left instead of right. However, the module never tells us what would have happened if they had gone to the left. While yes, discovering the natives that are living on the continents of this planet is neat and all, I really would have just liked a lot more diversity as far as what discoveries and what hazards there are in this adventure. The lack of map, the lack of raider stats, the plot holes that you find with the 100 diameter limit when describing the raider attack on the starport, it really makes this module feel like it's not entirely complete to me, and I don't think that those would have been details that have been that difficult for them to add.
My big beef here is the discovery of the natives that are living on the mainlands of Marduk. I mean, if this is the first time the player character's even been to this planet, it's like one moment they hear in orientation there is nobody living on the mainland, and then 10 minutes later they discover there's people living on the mainland, and it's kind of underwhelming. So my suggestion here is to make this not their first time that they've been on this planet. Make the knowledge that there is nobody living on the mainland of this planet not just something that they've heard, but something that both the players and the player characters truly believe.
You could do an earlier adventure before this one begins, where the player characters are part of some sort of archaeological survey team, and they're tracking the return to wildlife to these bombed out cities, or they're trying to determine how long it took the people on the mainland to die, because they didn't all die when the bombing happened. Maybe they were able to scrape by for 75 years before they all died out. Maybe some of the wildlife they discover is going to try to kill them, and that could lead to some interesting fights, or maybe they're going to encounter some awful bio or chemical or nuclear weapon that was dropped but hadn't gone off, and now the PCs have to disarm this horrible bomb before it kills them and the rest of the archaeological team. Maybe they'll do some thermal readings and they'll see several signs of fires, and they're going to get excited thinking that they found natives living here, but when they go and check it out, they're going to discover some sort of illegal smuggling or some sort of secret laboratory. Now the PCs have a fight on their hands, and that can lead to a lot of excitement. Either way, have them in that first adventure with the absolute certainty that there is no one living on the continents of this planet. That gives an actual impact and rouses a little bit of player interest once they play Marooned on Marduk and they discover that yes, there are people that are living on the mainland continents. Now they get to learn how many there were and how they were able to survive, as well as how they were able to avoid detection. And that now becomes something that they themselves are interested in because they truly believe that no one lived there. Now what I do like about this scenario are the personalities for the 3 NPC survivors. They have some great details about them that game masters can use, and that can lead to a lot of role-playing out different conflicts as personalities clash. That's part of why I like the idea of giving a 4th survivor that's maybe unconscious this entire time, and the PCs and NPCs might have to lug them around on a stretcher, because that can lead to a little bit of a moral dilemma and some good conflict, as maybe one person is saying, we have to leave them behind, they're slowing us down, while other people are saying, no, we have to save them, we can't let these hyena things eat them. So in conclusion, Marooned on Marduk has a lot of great aspects to it. However, game masters are still going to have to do a lot of legwork on their end in order to turn this into a great scenario.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff like game reviews and how-tos, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, travelers, you have a great day. We never did learn what that job was that Alexis had for us.